Hey guys, today I'm reviewing The Adventures of Rufus the Fantastic Pet, the Sonic the Hedgehog ripoff. Now, right when I say the movie is a ripoff, doesn't necessarily mean that the film was intentionally a ripoff, but even if that's not the case, it's still a ripoff. Like, a movie can still be a ripoff even though it never intended to be a ripoff. Because the movie's technically stealing other people's ideas without it noticing. Kind of funny how out of all the self-aware jokes that this movie made, the only thing that the movie wasn't self-aware about was the fact that it's a ripoff. Okay, guys, so what do I think about the story for this Sonic the Hedgehog ripoff, aka The Adventures of Rufus the Fantastic Pet 2020 film? Well, to be honest, the storyline is absolute garbage. No, I'm not joking. The storyline is absolute garbage. Like, there is nothing good to say about the storyline here. The humor is absolutely obnoxious. The characters would constantly or sporadically throw in as many wacky over-the-top puns or jokes or whatever freaking fourth wall breaks they could find for the audience to laugh at, and honestly, a lot of the jokes just don't land. I don't know what it is about this movie. This is one of those movies that thinks that it is so funny that its jokes are automatically gonna work, despite having a low budget. Like, this is a direct-to-home video movie. You don't expect high quality coming out of The Adventures of Rufus the Fantastic Pet. Already from the title, it sounds like a cheesy knockoff. But to my surprise, this movie actually thinks that it was so ambitious with its comedy. This movie actually thinks it's funny. They know what they were doing, so they think that they're automatically gonna make people laugh. So when watching this movie, I got really awkward reactions out of this film. Like, for real? They're trying to throw in as many jokes as possible, some of which are just so random. Like, for example, we get a bunch of slapstick scenes with Rufus trying to hide himself away from the humans, which reminds me way too much of Sonic, by the way, because, yeah, we had to rip off all those live-action CGI animated hybrids where we have the fish out of water jokes and the same typical slapstick that all these movies try to throw in at the children. I don't know why people think that children are going to watch these movies without feeling insulted, because in reality, this is pretty insulting. Like, it's not just insulting humor. I also find that the film's comedy is aiming pretty low, honestly. Like, in terms of the bar, this movie wasn't really setting the bar too high for its comedy. Like, my goodness, a lot of the jokes are barrel scraping at this point. But it isn't just the film's comedy that the film screwed up so badly. Like, even the film's plotline is very predictable, or in this case, cliched, because a lot of the time, you can guess the outcome of every single joke or action sequence that's going to happen to our main characters. Literally, the film follows a plot point A to point B formula, and you can easily guess every single step. It's like the film just wrote down all the notes or necessary rules when trying to write a cliched film. Like, they just followed the entire guideline for, like, cliches of a live-action CGI animated hybrid. Like, literally, all this movie does is have Rufus join the world of the humans, right? And then eventually, we go on this wacky, over-the-top adventure, which revolves around a bunch of wacky shenanigans that often results in filler that nobody really cares about that much for the film. It's really that bad. Like, there's so much filler throughout the entirety of this movie, because we're mostly dedicating it to wacky, over-the-top slapstick shenanigans or witty banter that the movie thinks is so funny. And I would blame this mainly on the writers trying to find as many excuses to make this movie as less predictable as possible, but instead, their attempts at trying to not be predictable end up becoming painful, because it's pretty much obvious that no matter how many twists or turns that writers put in to this movie, they're gonna do the cliche anyway. Like, this is one of those films that claims that they're not gonna do a cliche, or they point out how bad the cliche is, yet they do it anyway. So then what's the point of pointing out that the cliche is bad? You see what I mean? It's like The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle movie from the early 2000s. But this time, it's a freaking live-action CGI rodent in its place. That's it. This also affects the characters by making them seem like one-dimensional tropes of other films that we've already watched before. Like, the villain of the movie, in particular, reminded me a lot of the villain from Paddington, which is a movie I actually watched way before watching The Adventures of Rufus the Fantastic Pet. And I was like, hey, isn't this the same actress who played the villain in Paddington? And I was like, hold on. It's not. No. It's actually a different actress. Yet despite this, the film managed to make me believe that this was actually the exact same actress or somebody else in the role of the film's villain that, I got mixed up there. Sorry about that, but yeah. You know, you know what I mean. Oh, sorry I have to throw in some filler into this review, but hey, if the writers are not gonna be trying, why should I try? Because honestly, the writers are clearly not trying with anything they're doing in this movie. That's for sure. In general, the movie copies a lot of the same cliches throughout its formula. Rufus goes on an adventure with the main human characters. They all of a sudden travel to new worlds or destinations. He dies at one point, and then eventually the movie makes up its mind and says that he's alive. And rinse and repeat, you got the exact same formula repeated several times throughout the entire movie. Like, literally, I'm not joking. There are times where this movie even recycles green screen backgrounds just so we can say, you know what, wait, are we watching the exact same movie? Okay, now that we went over the story, let's go over the biggest factor of any movie, the visuals. So, how are the visuals for The Adventures of Rufus the Fantastic Pet? The visuals are mainly supposed to be the one thing that hooks you to the film. The one reason as to why movies even exist in the first place. Motion picture, or, in this case, moving images. Which is animation, in this case. Creative art of moving images. And does The Adventures of Rufus the Fantastic Pet at least offer good visuals, let alone good visual effects? Well, in this case, not really. In fact, I would say the animation here looks hideous. The biggest issue with this film's visuals is that the animation doesn't do anything uniquely special with its main CGI character or the main CGI lead, green screen tennis ball, and in this case, Rufus. He barely looks that much like an actual CGI animated character that belongs in an actual film. I would say this looks more appropriate for a student project or a commercial because there isn't really anything that the animators do that's truly special or unique with his animation style. It just looks kind of basic. There isn't really much to say. Like, sure, they gave him realistic textures, and I guess you can say that he blends in well with his live-action environments. Kind of? Maybe? Possibly? No, the animators couldn't even do that because half of the time, there are moments where he's barely rendered. He looks like a freaking commercial, where you can see that the backgrounds look so blurry, and it looks very lazy. Like, I would say that the animation looks very lazily edited, which in this case does not look very good. When talking about this movie, considering that it's supposed to be a direct-to-home video movie, and even direct-to-home video movies have better quality animation than something that's straight out of a commercial. Like, that's for sure. And look, I get that the art of CGI can be pretty hard, especially when making a CGI live-action hybrid film, and I'm pretty sure in this film's case, it must have been pretty difficult considering that they didn't really have that much of a budget to begin with, so they had to rush themselves a little bit, and to be honest, for a rushed film product, it doesn't look that bad, I guess, but I mean, I've seen far better CGI animations, and you can tell that the quality is way too rushed here to be considered actual good animation. Like, this is still not good enough to qualify as, like, decent, per se. Like, sure, I will give the animators some credit, or benefit of the doubt that the animation does have, like, good character movement. Like, at least, despite all my doubts with the animation, I will say that the character animation on Rufus looks okay-ish. I guess the only real issue is that whenever he bounces, it often looks weightless, almost like a freaking YouTube video. And that can be a big issue considering that this is a direct-to-home video movie, and again, I don't expect YouTube quality coming from a freaking straight-to-DVD movie. Like, even if this were on a streaming service, I'm pretty sure that still would have been pretty bad. But yeah, I don't know. Something about this movie's visuals just looks very lazy, and mostly pretty basic in this case. However, where the animation really looks bad mostly relies on the film's character design for Rufus. Character design-wise, Rufus looks pretty good on paper, but I feel like in execution, the way he was animated often looks pretty weird or creepy, almost diving into the uncanny valley territory, where I would say that his facial expressions look very off-putting, where he has these sort of like stiff-looking facial expressions that don't really match up well compared to most other live-action CGI hybrids. Like, it's not at the same level as Peter Rabbit, that's for sure, because Peter Rabbit, the animation on that movie, say what you will about Peter Rabbit, as much as people hated that movie, at least the CGI animation on his facial expressions, especially the way he moves in motion, like whenever he bounces across the screen, often looks very well animated. Here, they couldn't even make Rufus's movements look like they have any sort of weight whenever he jumps, and even when he makes facial expressions, they often look very creepy and off-putting for whatever reason. And that's mainly because the movie had a low budget. They didn't have the budget to make the animation good, so I guess half of the time they were like, okay, we're just gonna try our best, even if it looks like crap. And I know this may sound harsh, but even CI Ape has better animation than The Adventures of Rufus, because rendering wise, I feel like that movie has a far better technology compared to whatever this movie was using. Like, in general, that movie has far more better coloring and compositioning by comparison to The Adventures of Rufus, the Fantastic Pet. Heck, I would even go as far as to say that the model on the chimpanzee looks better than The Adventures of Rufus, the Fantastic Pet. Like, at least considering that it's an actual creature and not some wacky over-the-top abomination, you can tell that the animators were at least trying with that movie more so than what they were doing here. Lastly, that brings me to my final topic regarding this film, the characters and the acting. So, in general, the characters and the acting for this movie, yeah, I mentioned that they were pretty bad, and in this case, one-dimensional, which they are, yes. Because, like, the characters, they don't really offer that much except for a couple of character traits, and they would often do the exact same thing throughout the entirety of the movie. Like, once you know their character or personality, that's it. That's the character they have throughout the entirety of the movie. Like, I'm not joking. This is literally how the movie is trying to go with itself. Like, it doesn't really do anything special with these characters. It's just doing the exact same point A to point B plotline structure. And I will say that, acting-wise, this movie is also pretty bad because a lot of the time, the characters are often trying to act funny rather than actually be entertaining. And whenever they try to act funny, it's not even funny. They often make me annoyed, they made me groan, they made me upset, they made me infuriated. I hated these characters. Every single one of these characters. I hated this movie. Hated it! Sorry I had to quote that one line, but hey, if the movie's not even gonna try to attempt any good pop culture references, I might as well attempt something that's way better than what the movie is doing already. So yeah. Hey, at least my pop culture references are better than this film. Come on, you gotta admit that was a good reference. Right? Anyway. Yeah. In general, this movie throws in a lot of pop culture references, much like the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, but unlike Sonic, where the pop culture references actually have a meaningful purpose to the plotline, this movie just throws in any random references it wants, because, yeah, last time I checked, this is the kids' version of Family Guy. Anyway, yeah, this movie has some really bad references, like, they would often reference stuff that is not even popular anymore, or, not to mention, this film even has references to the director's previous films, which is kind of weird. Like, no joke, the director who made this movie actually was the same person who worked on The Adventures of Jurassic Pet, and throughout the entire movie, there are actually some references to his previous films, which is kind of weird considering that most of his previous movies aren't even that popular, and yet he's referencing those throughout the entire film. Like, in a couple of scenes, he does do that every so now and then, or like in between a couple of action sequences. Like, there was even that one moment where there was a skeleton T-Rex, which is supposed to be a reference to one of his dinosaur movies, and honestly, I don't really think that worked out pretty well. That was just pretty stupid, and yeah, you know. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I found that kind of to be more interesting than the actual humor that this movie's throwing out, because just the fact that this movie even has references to its own films makes it even more lazy. But yeah. Overall, to conclude, The Adventures of Rufus the Fantastic Pet is one of the worst live-action CGI hybrids, and easily one of the worst ripoffs of Sonic the Hedgehog, in this case, because honestly, it's not a good movie. It just fails on so many levels, and it just doesn't have the ambition or the right amount of competence to actually make it seem like a good movie. It's just a low corporate cash cow that is meant to cash in on the success of Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Smurfs, Yogi Bear, and all those other live-action CGI hybrids that were often considered really bad. And all the movie wanted to do is just make money off of that. Unfortunately, the movie did none of that. It was both a financial failure and it was both a critical failure. So, in this case, I can't really say much regarding this movie, but it's just a real bad movie that happened to fail on many levels. Yeah. It's just not a good movie. What can I really say? There isn't anything particularly special about this film. I just felt so damn annoyed whenever watching it. And for the most part, there really wasn't much worth my time. Like, honestly, I could have been spending my time watching a different film. But hey, I had to review this movie just because of you guys. So, thanks a lot. Yeah. That's all I have for today. Thank you for watching this review. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.